Here, go.
Say, she's got to go. Nick, it's that crazy girl with the jacket. What?
You, out.
You know me?
Yeah, I know. You want a free meal? Go someplace else.
Well, she got money. I can pay her.
Rosanna Arquette and Aidan Quinn and Desperately Seeking Susan, one of the new movies we're going to be reviewing this week. I'm Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune. In addition to Desperately Seeking Susan, we'll also be reviewing The Last Dragon, a new kung fu action comedy romance that covers about everything in the motion picture industry. And it's the latest movie from the Motown music empire. And later on in this show, in our special X-ray segment, we'll take a look at the relatively brief history of martial arts movies. But first, Roger begins with the latest movie written by Neil Simon.
And this, Gene, is a movie that has a whole lot of problems. It's a movie about love and baseball, and it doesn't know much about love, and it knows absolutely nothing about baseball. The name of the movie is The Slugger's Wife. Neil Simon, who wrote the screenplay, must have thought he put together a cute combination of romance and baseball, but the baseball in the movie is only a gimmick. Maybe it was intended to appeal to baseball fans, but the more you know about baseball, the more you're going to hate this movie. The Slugger's Wife stars Michael O'Keefe as an outfielder for the Atlanta Braves, who's in the middle of a hitting slump when he sees a beautiful nightclub singer played by Rebecca De Mornay.
Dale Palmer. You hit what, Dale? 244?
239. I went 0 for 5 today.
Dale's real anxious to make us proud of our Braves. So he's promised to hit not one, but 2 home runs out of the park tomorrow. That's a real tall order, Dale. If you want to withdraw, you just say so, and we'll forget the whole thing right now.
I'm going to go for it, all right, on one condition. If I do, Miss Debbie Houston promises to have dinner with me after the game. Now, if I don't, she's off the hook, and I give $1,000 to her favorite charity.
Now, you heard the offer, Debbie. What do you say?
Well, I already have a date for tomorrow night. But, considering the fact I'm going to raise $1,000 for charity, without much risk of breaking my date, I accept.
Thank you. I'll see you at the players' gate right after the game. Dressed semi-casual.
That'll be the pattern of the whole picture. Every time O'Keefe believes that De Mornay is in love with him, he hits a homer. And, of course, after he connects with the ball, he just stands there flat-footed at the plate every time looking to see if it's a homer, and then he's going to wink to De Mornay in the stands before he runs to first base. Hasn't anybody told this guy that if you run real fast after you hit the ball, sometimes you can even have a base hit even if you didn't hit a home run? Meanwhile, the plot gets dreary and it gets serious, which is the wrong thing with this lightweight material. O'Keefe is the possessive type, and De Mornay wants to continue her singing career. Finally, she leaves because she needs room to breathe, and then he goes into another hitting slump. And I'm telling you, when a movie like this gets sincere and thoughtful, that's when you know it's in trouble.
I didn't like it either, Roger, but on the baseball thing, just one point. Reggie Jackson is known for doing precisely that, which is when he thinks it's gone, he just stands there and then throws his bat aside.
Michael O'Keefe is not Reggie Jackson.
But that's the kind of character that he's that strong when he's in love with her. So I don't fault the movie on the baseball thing as much as I faulted. I thought you were going to knock it for love. So you took care of baseball.
You go right ahead, because I think I'll agree with you.
Well, here's the problem here. This film should be about, the character should be about 10 years older. He should be like a Pete Rose, an older ball player. Then the problems that he has in his relationship, I think, would make a lot more sense. And we would really be caught up in this fading guy at the end of the career trying to stave off and hit some home runs and trying to make his marriage work. Instead, this is very obviously material that these young actors, or decent actors, it's just totally inappropriate. This is a kiddie show playing in an adult world. It doesn't make any sense at all.
I think that's very true. And another thing,
I know why. Okay, I know why it's older. I know why it's older. Because Neil Simon is writing about his romance with Marsha Mason, I have a feeling, and why they had to split up, because they're both professionals and they want to.
Well, he's written about that before, and I have a feeling he'll write about it again. I'll tell you another thing about the film, though, and that is, this movie should be lighter weight in terms of its tone. It gets real serious at the end and has that real kind of thoughtful, will they stay together or not? I don't want to give away the conclusion, but I mean, it should have a happy ending. It should have I did give away the conclusion. It should have a little more of a light tone. This is really heavy stuff. Well, I will say, though, Michael O'Keefe is good as an actor. Rebecca De Mornay, this is the first time we've seen her since Risky Business. She is real cute and real engaging in this movie, but the movie just doesn't suit anything to work with.
They're just wrong, cast wrong for this film. Should have been cast older. Coming up next at the movie is a put-upon young housewife and a young woman into the punk scene trade places.
Are you okay? Are you all right? I'm sorry.
Rule number 1 was no drama.
In a movie called Desperately Seeking Susan, we watch two radically different women, in effect, trade places. First, there's the Susan character, played by rock star Madonna. Susan is into punk fashion and music and travels with a very hip crowd. Then there's Roberta, a young suburban housewife, very much controlled by her businessman husband. And their two radically different lives come together after Roberta notices a very romantic newspaper personals ad from a guy who says he's desperately seeking Susan, the Madonna character. Roberta wishes that someone was desperately seeking her in that bad marriage, so she begins following Susan, who in this scene has just walked into a funky clothing store.
Do me a favor, baby. Stay on the carpet, okay?
You're great, Uncle.
I know.
We gotta have him, man. $65.
That is the price.
Forget it.
I like the jacket.
This belonged to Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, but I bet he'd love it if I swapped it for the boots.
Deal. Gordon doesn't used to belong to Elvis Presley. You want to try it on?
Now, once she's wearing Susan's jacket, Roberta, played by Rosanna Arquette, becomes even more involved with Susan's life. She's mistaken for her by a friend because she's wearing her jacket. And now, later in the film, another little touch here, because she's got amnesia, she thinks she's Susan's too. And she winds up being pursued all over town by a whole bunch of people because Susan, the real Susan, has stolen some very valuable ancient Egyptian jewelry. Meanwhile, Susan winds up with Roberta's husband in his house. They begin partying together, and then Susan discovers Roberta's diaries, which help unravel everything that's happened.
I got good news and bad news. What do you want to hear first?
You said you were going to leave.
Okay, good news first. Your wife isn't partnered with the greaseball.
Susan, my wife has just been picked up on the Lower East Side, escaping from her gun-toting pimp.
He's not a pimp.
She's not a pimp.
He's not a pimp. The bad news is that he's probably going to kill her because he thinks she's me.
What?
Did you ever read this? She kept a diary. It's great stuff. Couldn't sleep. Went into kitchen. Gary came in. Turned on light. Gary left. Finished birthday cake. Pages of it. It's gotta be a cover. Nobody's life could be this boring.
You shouldn't be reading that. It's private.
Yeah, well, it's not about her. It's about me. Listen to this. He's looking for Susan again. She's late returning from Mexico. This is the 5th ad he's run. Why does he want to see her so badly? Who is she? And there's my picture. Gary, why didn't you tell me she read the personals? You could have settled this yesterday.
She read them all the time. I didn't think...
Yeah, well, fortunately for everybody, and I'm thinking. Give me the car keys.
Now, despite the very confusing plot, there's plenty to like in Desperately Seeking Susan. The two women characters are refreshing. The film has a bright, colorful look, but I found the whole pace of the movie to be achingly slow. This is supposed to be a very contemporary movie, and indeed, every character and every object and every issue in the film is quite contemporary. And yet the pacing of this film is tedious. We do know, despite the complicated plot, that eventually these paths are going to cross back together again, and we know it long before the director gets us there. Director Susan Siegelman, I think, belabors every colorful scene in this movie. If this film had been cut by a third, I think it would have been a lot more entertaining. While watching it, I kept saying to myself, come on, let's move it along.
I think that's a good criticism. I think that it could have been tightened up and made a little more screwball and slapstick.
Yes, that's exactly the tone it should have been, a screwball 30s comedy.
As you were describing the movie, I was chortling over here because the movie is so complicated and so hard to explain, and yet that, to me, was one of its charms, that every time that something happens, the opposite happens, and another mistaken identity takes place. That and the fact that Rosanna Arquette and Madonna are so good in this movie, together and separately, that's enough for me to give it a thumbs up, even though I agree with your criticism.
Yeah, it should have been just speeded up, and I think the director, if they maybe studied a little bit more of the 30s movies, would have speeded the film up. That was the key to those pictures with Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. That was the key.
Okay, so I'm just saying the human beings in this picture are good enough to give it
maybe
a
the
thumbs
projectionist should run it, faster or something.
Okay, there's a good idea. Coming up next at the movies, Kung Fu Comes to Harlem.
You don't mind if my friends introduce themselves to you, Leroy? Then let's begin!
It's called The Last Dragon, or more accurately, the complete title is Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon, because the boss of the Motown record empire produced this movie and put his own name up above the title. He also put his own recordings all over the soundtrack until the movie plays like a music video. I don't think there's one moment of silence from the beginning to the end. The movie stars Timac as a young karate student named Leroy. He likes to call himself Bruce Leroy, and he has saved the life of a VJ, a video jockey, played by the beautiful rock singer Vanity. In this scene, Vanity asked Leroy to be her bodyguard.
You know, the strangest things keep happening to me. I mean, I seem to be attracting the craziest people. So I thought that maybe it would be a great idea if I got myself a bodyguard, like someone to guard my body. Anyway, you seem to be the best qualified. I mean, a girl could do worse than to have her own real-life kung fu master.
I am no master.
You sure look like a master to me.
I'm all right. Meanwhile, an evil karate king who calls himself the Shogun of Harlem has a grudge against Leroy and challenges him to a fight.
Anywhere.
Leroy! Come on, man! Leroy! You warmed up yet? Yeah. Come on, Leroy! Let me out! Leroy! Be careful. Nothing like this on stage, screen, radio, TV, or cable, baby. This is an exclusive.
That's Julius J. Carey III as the Shogun of Harlem. The Last Dragon is a combination of a lot of technology and very little thought. The final sequence is staged in a disco with electronic music pulsing over every karate body blow, while the walls are covered with giant movie screens showing scenes from old Bruce Lee movies. It's kind of ridiculous, but what I liked about the film was the tender relationship between Timac and Vanity. They are both very appealing and very effective performers. And there's a really great early scene where the Shogun of Harlem walks into a movie theater that's full of Bruce Lee fans, and he challenges them all to a fight. I can't quite recommend the film. There are a lot of things in it that I like, though, but I can't quite.
You should.
I think this 10 yards.
Oh, I'm going 100 yards. I think this was a lot of fun. I had a ball. That first scene, and when the Shogun walks into the movie theater showing a Bruce Lee movie, this is like on 42nd Street, New York or something, and tears up the joint, challenges all the Bruce Lee fans, steps on a ghetto blaster.
Right.
That movie had me from that scene on. Then there is lots of fun with little kids walking around and acting tough. Vanity is a very appealing actress. You're right, Timac is good. There's more action, more laughs in this picture. I had a ball with it.
Okay, well, I liked all the things you liked. But
that's the whole picture.
There's a little more. There's that whole boring story about that guy that wants...
the short guy?
Yeah, he wants Vanity to
You're
show
right.
his video. And his girlfriend who talks in a squeaky voice.
They should have pulled that out. That was a rip-off from Superman. They should have pulled it right out.
And all of his gangster thugs that are going around chasing everybody. In fact, I have a rule of thumb in a movie, and that is whenever they have a subplot that involves a bunch of dumb gangsters chasing everybody around, which we also saw a couple of weeks ago in Into the Night. That subplot all by itself is usually enough to disqualify the movie because those gangsters are always the same and they're never entertaining. So that's a flaw. You admit that it is.
Yeah, that's one flaw, and I can name about 7 or 8 things else that I like. So it's a positive.
Okay, I say it's a close call.
Coming up next at the movies, we'll take a look at the 13-year history of martial arts movies in America. Our X-ray subject this week, Kung Fu movies. A good question for that Trivial Pursuit game would be, what was the first martial arts picture to play nationally in the United States? Tough question. It was 1973, and the film's name, Five Fingers of Death, starring, another good question, Lo Lee.
Okay, I don't mind having a go. Oh, watch out! He's tough!
It wasn't very well made, as you could see, an awful dubbing job with words completely missing the actors' lips, and yet this little film with a no-name cast caught the fancy of action movie audiences with its new style of violence and its simple stories of good and evil. Now, shortly after Five Fingers of Death, the martial arts movies got their first and still biggest star, Bruce Lee. His best picture, Enter the Dragon. He still is an absolutely charismatic star. Bruce Lee died shortly after making that film, and his death cut the head off of the Kung Fu movie boom. A lot of rip-offs would follow, with actors being billed as Bruce Lee's cousin. Remember that guy with the name Bruce Lee spelled L-I? But finally, in the late 70s, an American actor and karate expert, Chuck Norris, captured some of the same magic in a film called The Octagon.
Perhaps you can give us a little show. Let us see what you're supposed to be so good at. Try again.
Chuck Norris would go on to make more pictures of that kind and then expand his career. But the martial arts picture still foundered with cheap foreign films containing lame-brained stories. It wasn't until last year that we finally got a martial arts film with a decent story, The Karate Kid.
Balance key. Balance good. Karate good. Everything good. Balance bad. Better pack up, go home. Understand?
Yeah, I understand. Did you ever get into fights when you were a kid?
Plenty.
Yeah, but it wasn't like a problem I have, right?
Why? Fighting. Same.
Yeah, but you knew karate.
Someone always know more.
And right there with that picture, you can see the solution to the problems that undo most martial arts pictures. The problem is the story. The bad ones offer more karate action than anything else. The good ones are good stories first and foremost, with the martial arts stuff taking a back seat. The Karate Kid is a good story, and to a lesser extent, so I think is The Last Dragon that we were just talking about. That's why I think they both work so well. Build a story, then add the karate material.
I agree with your criticisms of karate movies in general. I was just thinking, though, as you talked about them, there are two kinds or two genres right now of really, really cheap exploitation films. Karate movies and dead teenager movies.
Right.
And they're not comparable. Dead teenager movies I have seen enough of. I just don't want to see any more Friday the 13th Part 19 or any more of those rip-offs like that. Karate movies are different because even though they're based on a lot of violence that's built in, They usually have a sense of humor, which is useful. They don't take themselves that seriously. They have high spirits. They're kind of cheerful, and they're not afraid to appear ridiculous. So that generally speaking, if I had to see a bad movie tonight, I'd rather it was a bad karate movie than a bad dead teenager movie.
Well, and that's why I still want to argue with you a little more on because The Last Dragon, I think, is very funny. There is a lot of humor put in there, too much with the little short guy, but I think that film knows what it's about, which is make it entertaining, and then if it has karate, that's good too.
Okay, I'll go this far for you, Gene. This is probably the most entertaining movie so far this year that I'm voting thumbs down on. Is that good enough for you?
Just to prove that you're a schizoid personality, but go ahead.
Thank you very much for your diagnosis. I'm sure it's worth what I'm going to pay for it. Nothing. Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed earlier this week on the program. We both voted thumbs down on The Slugger's Wife, the dismal Neil Simon baseball movie. I liked it even less than Gene did. But a split decision on Desperately Seeking Susan, thumbs up for me, especially for the charm of Rosanna Arquette and Madonna. And another split decision on The Last Dragon, as you just heard. The high-gloss karate movie, Gene thought it worked. I kind of liked it, but not enough to give a thumbs up. Sorry. But
still can't make up his mind? That's okay.
Maybe I'll get better one day.
There'll be another office visit for you tomorrow. That's it for this week. Next time we'll be reviewing 4 new movies, including Louis Malle's Alamo Bay, about trouble in the fishing waters of South Texas, and also from England, a film starring Michael Palin, Maggie Smith, and a pig. It's called A Private Function. Until then, we'll see you at the movies.